Oh, that is great. That is rich. P.S. I should say this. If you haven't heard where that sound bite comes from the joy button, it came from an overlaker, a grown man who had never been on snow in his life. Last year, got to go down a tubing hill, and that was the sound coming out of him. And we will use that button again and again in the future. I just know that. But here's what we're going to do together, in case you're just joining for the first time, or maybe you're at home and you just finished the World Cup. We are glad to be together. Something that we do in the season of Advent is mark our time by lighting a candle, each signifying something that Christ has brought 2,000 years ago and something we're anticipating in his return. And so this is what it reminds us of, is what light does in darkness, the hope that it brings, how it drives out darkness, and the symbolism of hope that it creates. And so today I want to invite everyone, even at home, to go ahead and say these words with me as I light this flame. There it is, right there. As we light this candle, like God's people before us, we recognize we are in the midst of waiting. And yet we look forward to the joy in the coming of Christ. And we also look forward to this lighter working. Okay. Problem solver. Look at this, you guys. That's right. We'll catch a flame from our love candle last week. Wow, you guys, thanks for clapping for me. That meant a lot. Just so proud. So proud. Let's do this. Let's open in prayer, and then I'm excited to dive in together. Lord, we mean what that prayer says. We don't say it out of rote. We recognize that we are joining, not just in a gathering here at present, but we are joining with those who have come long before us, and we know that there will be many, many more who come long after us. And we crave, and we desire, and we hunger for what only you can bring. And so this morning I ask that there would be a flame lit within us, reminding us of the joy that it cannot be extinguished when we find you. In your name, amen. Well, I wanted to start here. How many of you have either sent or received a message, a text, that had a problematic typo in the mix? Like quite problematic. Like it could be used as blackmail someday if you're not careful. I think we've either sent those or received those. I save every one of them, not knowing when they'll be needed. That's probably not a great thing to do, but the reality is this, is that there's times where there's just mistakes made. I actually think the English language is quite confusing. Even just the use of punctuation, I continue to learn the importance of punctuation. Fun fact, there's no punctuation in New Testament Greek, in case you didn't know. I think I was just born in the wrong century. But anyways, what perhaps you didn't know is that punctuation, it can save lives. It can save lives. And let me show you exactly what I mean here. There's a big difference between these two statements. A huge difference. With one, grandma is next to you at supper. With the other, she's on the plate in front of you. It's not good. It's not good at all. In fact, my grandma, she's going to love that. I know my grandma's sense of humor so much. 98-year-old Grandma Hoside in Spokane, that was for you. She'll write jokes and send them to me, and I love them so much. But there's a point to all of this, is what we've been looking at is the reality that there are details that show up in the narrative of what Matthew writes about the coming Christ, about the arrival of Jesus. And it would be easy to discount some of these words, some of these statements, some of these details as perhaps just mistakes or not really filled with intentionality. And the reality is it's altogether different. And here's kind of the capital kind of chief theme that we've been going after week, is it's that the good news is revealed in every detail of the story. It's revealed in every detail of the story, even the stories that show up before Jesus shows up. It all is pointing to Jesus. It's all pointing to the good news that we have in Jesus. And so we've been looking at some of these details that honestly are just easy to sidebar, skim over, airbrush, pretend they didn't happen. But Matthew includes them for a reason, as we'll find out this morning. So let me read just a portion of the genealogy. This is how Matthew starts his gospel, the story of Jesus, his life, his death, his burial, and resurrection. It starts with these words. Here's what he says. He says, this is a record of the ancestors of Jesus the Messiah. That's it right there. Everything he's about to share, everything that's coming afterwards is pointing to this man, Jesus the Messiah, a descendant of David and of Abraham. And you skip down and you kind of get into verse 5 here. It says Salmon, which, by the way, I said this last week and I didn't hear of any takers. If you're looking for a strong Pacific Northwest biblical name, right there. It's right there. It's just for the taking. Salmon was the father of Boaz, whose mother was Rahab. Boaz was the father of Obed, whose mother was Ruth. Obed was the father of Jesse. Jesse was the father of King David, bolded there, because that's who we're going to camp out on. But look at this. Look at what's included in this next line. It says, and David was the father of Solomon. In parentheses, a detail given here, something we are not going to miss, whose mother was Bathsheba, the widow of Uriah. So, something that's been said or commented on, and just to make sure I kind of clear on this, is we've talked about how it's actually scandalous, the fact that there are women included in the genealogy of Jesus. Not because these women themselves are scandalous. It's the cultural lens of the reader that is highlighting that fact. It's not the morality of these women. In fact, if you were to look at the life story of some of these men, they are the scandalous ones. They're the ones that you would be shocked to find out that God has divinely woven them into the lineage of Jesus on his earthly father's side. And so what we're going to look at is exactly that story right there. And it's brilliant in what Matthew is teeing up here, and we'll kind of camp out on this, but he's really beginning to drop something here, a detail, a story, something that the Jewish reader would know and understand, would be quick to remember from their Bible study, would be the fact of exactly this story of Bathsheba and Uriah. And it's to juxtapose King David with King Jesus. And we'll look at some of the differences. But first, let's get everyone on the same page with exactly this story. So we'll be in 2 Samuel chapter 11. You can follow on screen if you like having it right in front of you. Any of the Bibles will get you there. 2 Samuel chapter 11, starting in verse 1, and we'll go all the way through verse 17. And we'll just read it as it's been given to us. It says this, in the spring of the year, when kings normally go out to war, not a small fact right there, but when kings normally go out to war, David sent Joab and the Israelite army to fight the Ammonites. They destroyed the Ammonite army and laid siege to the city of Rabbah. However, David stayed behind in Jerusalem. Author's clear that is a key thing, and we'll come back to it. Verse 2. Late one afternoon, after his midday rest, David got out of bed and was walking on the roof of the palace. As he looked out over the city, he noticed a woman of unusual beauty taking a bath. He sent someone to find out who she was, and he was told she is Bathsheba, the daughter of Eliam and the wife of Uriah the Hittite. Then David sent messengers to get her, and when she came to the palace, he slept with her. She had just completed the purification rites after having her menstrual period. Then she returned home later. When Bathsheba discovered that she was pregnant, she sent David a message saying, I'm pregnant. Now, just to hit pause and to be clear here, and to remind all of us, I say this, and I just want to make sure all of us remember this. There's two tools that we always have when we come to the text, when we read Scripture. One, read carefully. Always read carefully. Two, ask good questions. Those things will lead you to better theology. But we got to read carefully and ask good questions. In reading carefully, we realize Bathsheba's not set up as this temptress. There is nothing, in fact, that Bathsheba is doing wrong. In fact, she's doing what the Torah would ask her to do. She's doing what would be expected of her. When you look at who is driving the action, not just apart from that poor decision to stay in town, but to actually then instigate and use power, his power that he's been given, it leads to abuse. She's a victim. David's the abuser. And this is why it is problematic. This is why it is shocking that Matthew would include this here. And it's problematic in even how this passage has been taught, how I've heard it taught, Or somehow Bathsheba's the one that's to take the blame for this, simply by being a woman. And that, David, well, boys will be boys. No. That is not what we see. That's not what we know. That's not who we're called to be. And so we continue now. Verse 6, we're about halfway through. Here we go. Then David sent word to Joab, send me Uriah the Hittite. So Joab sent him to David. When Uriah arrived, David asked him how Joab and the army were getting along and how the war was progressing. Then he told Uriah, go on home and relax. David had even sent a gift to Uriah after he had left the palace. But Uriah didn't go home. He slept that night at the palace entrance with the king's palace guard. When David heard that Uriah had not gone home, he summoned him and asked, what's the matter? Why didn't you go home last night after being away for so long? David's trying to come up with a plan to cover up his evil act. He's trying to coyly try to figure out a way to get Uriah to come back off the front lines, get home, and that somehow months later Uriah would think that this child is his. But Uriah, here is his reason why. It shows just how righteous he is. Again, it kind of compares and contrasts him to even David, the king. Here is what Uriah replies. Uriah replied, the ark and the armies of Israel and Judah are living in tents. And Joab and my master's men are camping in the open fields. How could I go home to wine and dine and sleep with my wife? I swear that I would never do such a thing. Well, stay here today, David told him, and we start to see just how deep he gets into this plan. And tomorrow you may return to the army. So Uriah stayed in Jerusalem that day and the next. Then David invited him to a dinner and got him drunk. But even then, he couldn't get Uriah to go home to his wife. Again, he slept at the palace entrance with the king's palace guard. Again, part of a plan, part of a ruse. If he can just get this to work. Bonus point. Alcohol rarely solves problems. It creates more than it solves, okay? Here we go. Last bit, last few verses. So the next morning, David wrote a letter to Joab and gave it to Uriah to deliver. The letter instructed Joab, station Uriah. Look how evil this is, guys. Look at station Uriah on the front lines where the battle is fiercest, then pull back so that he will be killed. So Joab assigned Uriah. So he's carrying his own death sentence in this letter to Joab. So Joab assigned Uriah to a spot close to the city wall where he knew the enemy's strongest men were fighting. And when the enemy soldiers came out of the city to fight, Uriah the Hittite was killed. And then I find this interesting. We have these words as well. Along with several other Israelite soldiers. You see the collateral damage of David's decision here, really decisions, and what it's led to. Not just with the victimization of Bathsheba, not just with the death of Uriah, but now there's other families. The boys aren't coming home. There's other parents grieving and siblings and kids because of what David has done here. It's David's lowest point, and Matthew includes it as he's teeing up Advent, the arrival of Jesus. Here's what he's doing. You got to know, King David is like the best king. You look at all the generations come after King David. He's the best. Those were the glory days. Those were the good old days, is the thought. They were at their military height, their geopolitical power in the region. This is when things were best. To be compared to King David was actually a good thing, something you aspired to. Matthew, again, is juxtaposing. We need a king who's actually not like David. We need a king who is better than anyone who has come prior. This is what he's teeing up and pointing us. This is why there's that anticipation and longing and desire for a Messiah who is perfect and good. And so here are three things. I just want to look at three things briefly that we can compare King David with King Jesus on. And the first is this. It's around wisdom, comparing the kings on wisdom. You look at David, wisdom's denied. It's denied. You look at Jesus, and it's applied. It's lived out. I mentioned this earlier, but David just simply wasn't where he should have been. He was supposed to be on an out-of-town work trip at the time, and he wasn't. And I know personally, The things that I regret doing are because I was places I shouldn't have been, largely. And those are decisions that we make on a daily basis that have ramifications. If you just change that first sentence, the rest of that narrative's not even there. Where we find ourselves, where we place ourselves is huge. I was thinking, knowing that there's middle schoolers, high schoolers with us today, this passage was picked long before the plan was you were here. I don't know if I should say I'm sorry or what. But I was thinking about you guys as I was writing, and in particular in this area, is that these are two huge decisions, and these are formative years. These are important years, middle school, high school, as you move into college, beyond, kind of young adults. And two things that are huge that you keep coming back to is just where you are and who you're with. Where you are and who you're with. We want the most full, abundant life for you. We do. And those two things continue to surface as very important as you're making decisions. Where you are and who you're with. And it's true of all of us as well. But the reality is David knows better. He denies wisdom by not doing what he knows is best. He denies it by not doing what he knows is best. Jesus, meanwhile, always walks with wisdom, lives with wisdom. Here's John 5:19. Here's how Jesus explains it to those hearing him. So Jesus explained, I tell you the truth, the Son, speaking of himself, the Son can do nothing by himself. He only does what he sees the Father doing. Whatever the Father does, the Son also does. This is why here, if you're curious what Overlake is about, how we want to live, the type of people we want to be, we want to live with Jesus in our sights. We want to do the things that Jesus did. We want the Jesus way. We want the Jesus life. We want to only do and say and go where it is that Jesus is leading, what he's speaking. It's a life filled with wisdom. Secondly is this, comparing the kings on power. We see with David in this moment, power at its worst. With Jesus, we see power at its best. And you know, we could use a whole history lesson of exactly that. Putting things where power has done great evil and harm and abuse. Power that has set captives free. Power that has brought healing. Power that has brought reconciliation. And in this moment, we just see it starkly, exactly the difference between David and Jesus. Here's what we actually need: someone who's coming, who is unlike anyone before. Often we're trying to compare someone to be like someone. Jesus sets the standard entirely. We all have power. We all exercise it in one way or another, and it changes given context, given settings we're in. Some structures are in place long before we were born and showed up that dictate to us, and we've talked about this particularly around race and sex, just what it looks like with that power structure and power dynamics in play, where it's robbed and where it's benefited some. And so it's led to us wanting to have a culture here of asking questions like this. Who's at the table? Who's not at the table? Who's a part of the decision-making process? Who's impacted by the decision? Have they been included? It's an area that Neely and I want to steward well. There was a practice that we heard of a pastor at a church in Queens that he asked his board, he asked his board to go through 7 questions with him on a regular basis. So we've started this with the elders as well. And so once a month we have the female elders meet with Neely, the guys meet with me, and they go through the same 7 questions. And again, it's about stewarding the power that even we have. And I encourage you to come up with questions and to seek those that can ask those hard questions to you. Here they are. I'll just share them really fast. It's, number 1, as a pastor, am I living in the truth? Are there any areas in my life where I'm not living with integrity? Second, do I have friendships that help me face my dark side, my shadow? Third, am I submitting myself to authority willingly, joyfully, and transparently? Fourth, what are the limits, whether it's time or energy or money or power, that I'm currently violating? Fifth, as a pastor, where do I feel entitled? These are great questions and hard. 6, do I have seasons of therapy to grow in self-awareness? 7, Does my spouse have space to share with the leadership of the church how things truly are at home? Again, I think as we want to grow in wisdom, to stop, to pause, and to craft some questions that, again, you build in with community to go over. A great book, there's so many things that I wanted to say on this particular point, and a great book that I read on power, theology of power, is Playing God by Andy Crouch. And so if you're looking for a little read to pick up, maybe to read over the course of the break coming up, it's one that I would suggest. I found it helpful on many things. But the reality is, David is known as a man with blood-stained hands. He's known as a warrior. It's actually what keeps him from being able to build the temple. Jesus also has blood-stained hands, but not because of other people's blood. It's unlike David. It's his own. It's a sacrificial love. And that is the beautiful display of power that we see in the Messiah, in King Jesus. It is unlike the powers that we see in the world around us. And the story continues, even with Bathsheba. She goes from robbed of her voice, she had one, by the way, it just wasn't listened to or honored, to now she has a voice, and you kind of track with the story, where she is actually, it's her voice that's dictating who becomes the next king. It's her influence, her voice that leads to this divine lineage of Jesus. It's as if Bathsheba would want every victim of abuse to know this, that each of us is more than the worst thing that's ever happened to us. Each of us is more than the worst thing that's ever happened to us. And I know that the enemy would seek to have each of us think of the worst thing that perhaps we've done, a chapter in our own lives, where something's been done unto us, and have it define us, and it doesn't. You're beloved. You're loved by God. The third and final point is this, comparing the kings on grace. The first, with David, we see that grace is needed desperately for all the wrong that he's caused here. With Jesus, we see that grace is embodied. You read the next chapter of the story, and you see that a prophet of God, his name is Nathan, he comes and he shares essentially a parable with David, and David has some righteous anger as he's hearing this parable, and then he realizes it's him. It's him. And you would think, based on everything we've read thus far, he would just have Nathan killed. The reality is, he confesses. It breaks him. He's confronted with his brokenness, with just what it is that he's done. He no longer lives in a state of denial, and it grieves him. In fact, one of the most kind of quote-unquote popular psalms that we have actually comes out of this chapter, this episode in David's life. I'll read it for you. It's Psalm 51. Here's again the words of David as he's met with this reality of what it is that he's done. Have mercy on me, O God, because of your unfailing love. David has a theology of grace that I actually aspire to. He actually recognizes how great God's love is, how compassionate and merciful God is. It continues. He says, because of your great compassion, blot out the stain of my sins. Wash me clean from my guilt. Purify me from my sin. For I recognize my rebellion. It haunts me day and night. Against you and only you have I sinned. I have done what is evil in your sight. You will be proved right in what you say, and your judgment against me is just. For I was born a sinner, yes, from the moment my mother conceived me, but you desire honesty from the womb, teaching me wisdom even there. Purify me from my sins, and I will be clean. Wash me, and I will be whiter than snow. Oh, give me back my joy again. You have broken me. Now let me rejoice. Don't keep looking at my sins. Remove the stain of my guilt. Create in me a clean heart, O God. Renew a loyal spirit within me. Do not banish me from your presence, and don't take your Holy Spirit from me. There is grace, grace, grace. Love, love, love. Compassion, compassion, compassion. There's newness. Just as we are more than the worst thing that's happened to us, as Brian Stevenson says, and I love this quote so much, each of us is more than the worst thing we have ever done. And this this is the good news of what Jesus comes with, what Jesus brings. That the worst things that we've done, it doesn't define us. That God calls us beloved. And it takes humility. It takes a lot of humility to say, I'm broken. I've messed up. I don't have things all put together as much as I'd like to project. Especially, and this is where it's unique, especially for those in positions of power, to be at a place of humility, to admit fault and guilt. I'd like to invite everyone in this moment to stand with me for all who are able. And just to kind of tease this out a little bit, I'm actually ripping this from Pastor Drew. And then we're going to invite some participation here, even if you're joining us online. But raise your hand if you've ever told a lie. Just raise your hand if you've ever told a lie. Look around. Is anyone, any hands down? We're kind of proving our point, right? How many of you ever got caught telling a lie? You've ever got caught telling a lie? How many of you ever felt bad when you got caught telling a lie? How many of you said, I'm not ever going to tell a lie ever again? That didn't feel so good. How many of you lied again? Right? We need to be transformed. We need grace. We need someone that shows us the way. And that's just around kind of, not telling the truth. How many other areas of our lives is it the same thing? Oh man, we need grace. Oh, we need grace. And Jesus comes and gives it freely. How many of you have made it worse? You try so hard, you white knuckle it. You mess up, you're like, okay, I can make that go away. I have something in my office that reminds me of sin every single day. It's from my son, Sailor. He was drawn, sometimes in my office, drawn on my little like whiteboard, glassboard, whatever it's called, and the marker kind of fell off and it hit the wall. So what's he do? He's a smart kid. You take the eraser. You just erase the wall. It'll go right away. And now I'm left with that. You don't know how often I just want to paint over that thing, and I've kind of found this unique beauty in it. I've kind of found this unique reminder in it all. How many parts of our lives look like that? How many of us are trying to fix other lives with erasers? Wow. We just need to be transformed. We need another way. We can't figure this out on our own. And Jesus is the way. It's why Jesus has come. It's why Jesus has come to show that we're not alone in this. The answer isn't to try harder. No. It's to follow Jesus. What does Jesus' name mean? We get this prophecy fulfilled. Matthew 1:23. Look, the virgin will conceive a child. She will give birth to a son, and they will call him Emmanuel, which means God is with us. So today, right now, we're going to pause and we're going to be reminded of that truth and just how good of news it is and just how grateful we are for even the weird, strange, dark details. They feel like family secrets, but they're part of family stories. We are reminded that no. It's the good news of Jesus. So I invite you to respond in this time as we worship that Jesus, that God is with you, that we get to see Jesus, we get to see Yeshua, we get to see Emmanuel, we get to be with the God who has come to be with us. Let's respond.
Can hope be found after shame? Can love rewrite my selfish claim? Then big speech to the storm. We find your strength in our mistakes, and we see Jesus, Yeshua, Emmanuel, God with us. We are blessed. We are blessed to be followed by grace, seeing new life. Sing it with me, church, if you can. See new life, birth out of our pain. Testimonies of the saints, testimonies of the saints. And every story tells me, and every story tells me your love remains. And we see Jesus, Jesus in those stories, Yeshua, Emmanuel, God with us, God with us. Good news, a Savior, Redeemer, Lamb of God, Lamb of God, the living well, living well. Say we see you, we see in every part of our lives, moving, having your way. We see you in our waiting, in our victory, our lessons. We see you. Say it again. We see you. We see you. Open the eyes of our hearts, oh mighty God. Mighty God, say, we see you. We see you. Like Judah and Tamar. Like Judah and Tamar, we see a royal land. Like Ruth and Israel, we see faithfulness. Like David and Bathsheba, we see redemption. Like Rahab and Jericho, we see deliverance. We see Yeshua, Emmanuel, God with us, a Savior, a Savior.